Have you ever noticed that some narcissistic men seem oddly obsessed with traits commonly associated with women? The fascination with beauty, emotional expression, or even social dynamics often seems a bit too strong to be just personal preference. But what if I told you that, deep down, some narcissistic men secretly wish they could be women? In today's video, we'll dive into this surprising and often misunderstood aspect of narcissism and uncover why these men may harbor desires that conflict with their outward behavior. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content on narcissism, relationships, and self-awareness. Let's unpack the psychology behind narcissistic men and their complex relationship with gender identity. Here are some dark psychological factors behind this: why narcissistic men secretly want to be women. Number 1. The hidden power of narcissism: why men secretly desire femininity. Narcissistic men are often seen as embodiments of hypermasculinity, dominant, assertive, and often arrogant. Yet, beneath this exterior, there's a complex and hidden psychological layer that reveals a fascinating truth. Many narcissistic men secretly desire the traits traditionally associated with femininity. This desire isn't about a genuine wish to be women, but rather about the power and validation they perceive femininity to offer. In the narcissist's world, power isn't always about brute force or dominance, it's about control, admiration, and influence. And they see women as wielding a form of subtle, indirect power that men, particularly narcissistic men, long to access. Women often garner admiration through beauty, emotional expressiveness, and charm, qualities that many narcissists secretly envy. They crave the ability to captivate attention and influence others without relying solely on aggression or overt superiority, which they view as tiring and emotionally draining. This hidden longing is fueled by the narcissist's deep insecurity and fragile ego. While they outwardly flaunt strength and control, they secretly long for the emotional freedom and validation that femininity seems to offer. Narcissistic men often suppress their own vulnerabilities, fearing that showing weakness would destroy their carefully crafted image of perfection. However, when they look at women, they see a way out, an opportunity to be admired, adored, and even cared for in ways that don't require them to constantly prove their worth. They may fantasize about embodying femininity not to escape their gender, but to access the unspoken privileges that come with being perceived as nurturing, emotionally free, and effortlessly captivating. In their minds, femininity offers them the perfect blend of admiration and emotional freedom without sacrificing their control or image. Number 2. Fragile masculinity. The dark psychology behind narcissistic men's secret desire. At the surface, narcissistic men often appear as embodiments of traditional masculinity: confident, dominant, and unyielding. However, beneath this mask lies a profound fragility. Narcissism is rooted in insecurity, and for many narcissistic men, the intense need to project strength and superiority is a defense mechanism to cover up their feelings of inadequacy and vulnerability. Their fragile masculinity demands constant validation, often through dominance, control, and a carefully constructed image of invulnerability. The dark truth is that deep down, many narcissistic men secretly crave what they perceive as the emotional freedom and nurturing power women possess, qualities that they feel are unattainable within their rigid, hyper-masculine identity. They envy the ability of women to express vulnerability without judgment, or to be adored for beauty and emotional appeal, which they believe grants them an effortless form of influence. This desire to embrace femininity isn't about identifying as women, but rather about gaining access to the perceived privileges that come with femininity in society. Narcissistic men may feel stifled by the societal pressures to constantly perform as the strong, tough man. They secretly long for the emotional fluidity and validation that women receive more easily, often fantasizing about the ability to be admired and loved for simply being beautiful or vulnerable without having to prove their worth constantly. The psychological conflict between their fragile masculinity and the allure of feminine traits creates a deep inner turmoil, as they are unable to reconcile their need for control with their secret wish for emotional expression and admiration. This hidden desire exposes a deeper aspect of narcissism, a struggle to balance power with emotional nourishment, making them resentful of the freedom they believe femininity offers. Number 3. Envy of emotional influence. Why narcissistic men crave the power of femininity. Narcissistic men often wield power through dominance, control, and aggression, but beneath their external bravado lies a subtle yet powerful envy of femininity. Women, in many ways, have the ability to influence and manipulate social dynamics with a softer, more indirect approach, one rooted in emotional intelligence, charm, and vulnerability. For narcissistic men, this emotional influence represents a type of power they secretly crave but cannot easily access. Unlike their aggressive, domineering style, the emotional appeal of femininity allows women to captivate, nurture, and manipulate situations without the need for brute force. This form of influence often feels more fluid, more organic, and even more effective in gaining attention and validation, which are the lifeblood of a narcissist's fragile ego. Narcissistic men envy the ability of women to be seen as captivating, approachable, and desirable simply by expressing emotions, a form of control they long to embody. This envy of emotional influence goes deeper than a mere appreciation of feminine traits. It is an unconscious desire to escape the rigid, cold facade of masculine dominance. Narcissistic men, often emotionally stunted themselves, find emotional vulnerability and expression to be both alluring and powerful. They secretly long for the ability to be loved, cared for, and admired without the constant need to prove their worth through dominance or superiority. While they may outwardly reject emotional vulnerability as a sign of weakness, inwardly they crave the emotional recognition and the social ease that femininity seems to provide. The power to emotionally influence others without exerting force and to be admired for their beauty or sensitivity becomes an unattainable ideal that narcissistic men can never fully express without compromising their carefully constructed image of strength. In this hidden desire lies a deep psychological conflict, the craving for emotional freedom and validation versus the fear of appearing weak. Number 4. Beauty as power. How narcissistic men secretly long to be admired like women. For narcissistic men, beauty isn't just a superficial trait, it's a symbol of power, influence, and validation. While they often project an image of strength, dominance, and control, many secretly envy the attention and admiration that women receive for their beauty. In a world that often values physical appearance, narcissistic men may find themselves wishing they could effortlessly captivate others with their looks, much like women do. This longing isn't just about wanting to be attractive, it's about the power that beauty grants. Women who are admired for their appearance often receive a different kind of attention. They are desired, cherished, and treated with a level of reverence that narcissistic men long to experience. For these men, the ability to be admired not for achievements or power, but simply for being beautiful, represents an untapped form of influence they secretly crave. This deep desire to be admired like women reveals a profound internal struggle. Narcissistic men, often trapped in the need to assert dominance and control, may find that beauty offers them a more passive, yet equally powerful form of validation. While their masculinity requires constant performance and superiority to maintain their self-worth, the admiration that comes with femininity offers a simpler, more direct form of recognition. Narcissistic men long for the ability to be desired and adored effortlessly without having to constantly prove themselves through action or aggression. They secretly fantasize about the ease with which women can command attention, not through force or power, but through their inherent attractiveness. This longing for beauty as power reflects a deeper psychological conflict, the need for constant admiration and validation without the exhausting pressure of maintaining an impenetrable masculine facade. Number 5. The emotional trap. How vulnerability triggers narcissistic men's hidden fantasies. Narcissistic men are known for their carefully constructed facade of creative invulnerability and emotional impenetrability. To them, vulnerability is seen as weakness, something that contradicts their image of strength and control. However, beneath this rigid armor lies a paradoxical yearning. While they reject emotional openness in themselves, narcissistic men are often drawn to the vulnerability of others, particularly women. This attraction to emotional fragility is not rooted in empathy, but in a deep-seated fantasy of power. Vulnerability represents a form of emotional leverage that these men secretly envy. They see women, for example, using their vulnerability to garner sympathy, affection, and admiration, qualities that narcissistic men struggle to achieve in a world where emotional expression is often deemed a weakness for them. For narcissistic men, the ability to be adored and cared for without having to constantly assert dominance is a deeply alluring fantasy, one that they long to experience themselves but can never openly admit. This emotional trap creates a tension in the narcissist's psyche. They are fascinated by the power that vulnerability seems to offer, yet they are terrified of embracing it themselves. In their minds, expressing emotional weakness could shatter the illusion of control they've worked so hard to build. Instead, they fantasize about inhabiting a space where vulnerability is not a liability, but a strength, a space where they can be emotionally cared for without jeopardizing their sense of superiority. The idea of being both admired and nurtured without having to perform the exhausting role of the strong man becomes a seductive possibility, one that challenges their fear of appearing weak. Yet, because of their narcissistic pride, they are unable to reconcile these desires with their outward persona, thus creating an internal conflict that often remains hidden even from themselves. This paradox of wanting emotional release without sacrificing dominance is a defining characteristic of the narcissist's deep psychological struggle. To wrap up, the idea that narcissistic men secretly want to be women might sound strange at first, but it's rooted in their complex relationship with power, vulnerability, and validation. Narcissism is all about wanting to be adored, and for some, this means desiring the traits associated with femininity, whether it's the beauty, emotional expressiveness, or the more indirect forms of influence that women often seem to hold. If you found this video thought-provoking, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into narcissistic behavior and how it affects relationships. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourselves.